meeting has been posted as required by a law. Item 1, roll call. Jim Olson.
Here.
Harvey Bertrand.
Here.
Bob Muth present. Also, City Administrator, Mayor are present. Alderman Benash, Every, and Jurgson are also in the audience. And our Finance Director, Fred Bueller, and Hope Burchell, our Human Resources. Item 2, approval of minutes from previous meeting.
So move.
Moved by Jim.
Second.
Second by Harvey. Discussion. There being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So ordered. Item 3, public input. Anyone wishing to come forward to give public input, limited to 3 minutes for each individual. First call. Second call for anyone wishing to give public input. Third and final call, anyone wishing to give public input. That portion is now closed. Consideration possible action on the following items. Finance. Item 4, Omni Center financials for 2017. Fred.
Okay, in your packet is the Omni financials through the month of November. The revenues represent $523,000 compared to expenditures of $505, which is a positive $17,685. Keep in mind the expenditures are a month behind. But in the month of December, it will be a catch-up then because usually the items that we pay in January are December's business and recognized as accounts payable and booked into last year's books. Other than that, I don't have anything more to add in reference to the Omni Center financials.
I'll make a motion to approve the Omni Center financials for 2017.
Second.
Second by Jim. Discussion. So, Fred, we still have, what, December?
December revenue, and then you also have the bills that we paid in December here for November bills, and then you also have December's bills paid in January, which will be recorded back as accounts payable.
Dan?
If I could just update,
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I'm on Fred quite frequently to try to get these numbers where we're at. So Fred did give me, right after the last council meeting, so the bills paid through November would also has payroll in for the month of December. So currently where we sit as of the last bills, we show a deficit of $12,000. Now what that includes is $20,000 of payroll. So we have all of November's bills paid, and we have $20,000 of payroll that's already hit our books that is in that figure. Now, it also in that number, because of events that we've had, concessions and things, there's roughly $9,000 of revenue for the month of December in this number. But please keep in mind, we don't have room tax for the months of November or December, which last year there was roughly $6,000 per month, would be additional $20,000 or $12,000, excuse me, so which would wipe that deficit out. The month of November, December, January, February are usually profit months for us with the amount of ice and things that we're using. So I'm confident here, that when we come back in January, probably won't be till February till we get everything ironed out, that we will have some very good news to share.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate what you're doing up there.
Thank you, Dan.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So ordered. Item 5, General Fund Financials 2017. Fred.
Enclosed in your packet is the financials for the general fund. Again, in reference to the revenues are through the month of November. The expenditures are through the bills that were paid through the month of through the month of November, paid in December. So we have 1 month of revenues and expenditures to come yet through the general fund. The one that I think it's going to be interesting to watch, and it is there's a sand and salt on page 11 of 15, I believe through the Board of Public Works, we had figured there would be between 13 to 15,000 deficit, $2,400, I'm sorry, $6,128 deficit. That was as of this report, and I would assume that he bought some sand and salt, but again, this has been a very, very mild winter. And I think you would also reflect that in the labor costs, that they weren't out as much as they have been in the past history. You compare one year to another. So other than that, I'll have a better idea here in about a month and a half as to how the general fund, but I feel pretty confident the general fund will hopefully stand pretty stable and be a positive outlook.
I think Jared Holter has been able to control the weather so we don't have snow, and we've saved a great amount of money on plowing and salting, so thanks, Jared. I'll throw that in there. I'll make a motion to approve the general fund financials.
Second.
Second by Jim. Discussion. There be none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Item 6, review and consideration of the 2018 summary of financial plan for the upcoming capital projects.
I'd like to turn the meeting over to Brad Vergoot, who is our financing manager to help us through the capital projects that the City of Onalaska is exploring for the year of 2018.
Thanks, Fred. Hi, everyone.
Hi there.
I'll walk through the packet that's included in your larger Finance Committee packet and answer any questions. This is just a little bit of a different approach than we've taken in the last several years, so I want to make sure to walk through that everyone understands the approach that's being recommended. First, you'll see there's two sets of financings. First is a note anticipation note. A note anticipation note is simply a short-term financing in anticipation of a long-term borrowing. For the past several financings, the city has used a state trust fund loan to fund projects that are ineligible for long-term bonding. With this approach, we're suggesting that you, instead of using a state trust fund loan, borrow the funds that are not eligible for a long-term bonding from your general fund as a part of this note anticipation note. In addition, there's utility projects that are scheduled, they're included in your 2018 CIP. However, those funds will not be needed until 2019. So some of those projects are set aside, figuring we'll come back next year with long-term bondings that are probably going to be enterprise bondings, so they're not general obligations of the city, they're revenue-backed issues of the city. But in the interim, there are some projects that are included in your 2018 CIP for your enterprise funds, which you will need funding for. So those projects are also included in this note anticipation note. And the specific projects are outlined under the heading of purpose. You can see the first several are 2018 CIP projects ineligible for the long-term bonding, but they are eligible for note financing. And then about halfway down that section, the revenue-supported projects that would be financed in 2018 are outlined. And again, the second set of those projects that are approved for 2018 would come back for a 2019 issuance. So the structure of this note is just over a one-year repayment period. So the final maturity would be scheduled, or one maturity would be scheduled for July of 2018. But it's not the intent that the city levies a tax or takes enterprise funds to pay off the note. Instead, this time next year, we'll be talking about a refinancing of that note into a long-term bonding for your general obligation projects, and also into long-term bonding on the enterprise projects. So there'll be several sets of financings to accomplish that. I anticipate that the long-term bonding of the 2018 projects that takes place in 2019 can be wrapped in with the city's 2019 long-term projects. So ultimately, you get to a very efficient financing where there's one long-term bond that's going to serve a couple of years of projects. It's going to help administratively, one less debt issue to monitor, one less set of payments to wire to the bondholders, and so on. But along with this final maturity date scheduled for July 1st of 2019, there's a call feature, and that is the eligibility to prepay the debt begins on April 1st of 2019. So you see there's a 3-month window there that the city has to lock in the permanent financing. The purpose of that is to not have one set payment date that the city has to get that financing locked in, because if there would be a market disruption or for some reason you couldn't access the market, or if there's a delay in preparations, if you've got that one payment date, you're really stuck and you need to get something locked in by then. So we've created some flexibility here. With our intent would be to come back to you along the same type of a timeline that we regularly follow, and that really gives us a nice time horizon to get something locked up. The estimated interest rate on that note is 2.27%. And then on the right-hand side of this page, there's a bond issue. And this bond issue funds all of the projects included in your capital improvement program that are eligible to be funded with long-term bonding. So with the exception of those enterprise projects, those were carved out and again will be taken care of for next year. So this is a 20-year repayment. The final payment date would be 2037. First interest is scheduled for October of this year, and the estimated interest rate there is 3.11% for the long-term financing. In terms of the timetable, it's outlined on the following page. With your authorization tonight, the council would take up initial resolutions at its meeting February 13th. We'd start the process of preparing the official statement, securing the bond rating, marketing the security out to investors. I would be back at the council meeting on March 13th to present the final rates. So there'd be 2 sets of resolutions, one for the note anticipation note and one for the general obligation bond. It's that adoption, that action that evening. Should those resolutions be adopted, the rates would be finalized at that point. So what I'm showing right now is really just our best estimates based on the current market condition. And then I've got the closing date indicated as April 3rd. That's the date that the funds become available to the city. I have a lot of detail on the next 2 pages, just to spend a minute or so. The boxed-in area represents the 2 sets of financings that we just discussed, the note anticipation note and the long-term bond issue. Left-hand side of the box is the debt service of the city that's supported by your tax levy. So you can get an indication that as we have drop-offs built into those repayments, that allows us to layer in this issuance and future issuance. And if you go to that far right-hand side of the page, you can see that for 2018, your tax-supported levy is budgeted for $3.88 million. It would increase slightly into 2019, estimated at $3,931,000, and then starts to drop back down, allowing for future financings again to be layered in to fund your annual capital projects. And then the detail on this last page of this presentation. This provides the breakout. On the very top of that page is an indication of what the council has adopted for the 2018 CIP. The sewer portion, water, storm, and then towards the right-hand side are your general projects. There's projects here that would be, where I say projects to be funded in 2018. Those are detailed and then totaled on the bottom. And then going down below the total section, I have an outline of the projects that would be funded in 2019 but were approved as a part of the 2018 financing or CIP. And then so that comes up, that then generates the project amount funded by the NANs, and that's in the circle. The NAN is that note anticipation note. So we're funding $1,538,503, and then the long-term bonding is next to that, $3,568,637 of projects would be funded with the long-term bonding. A little bit of a different approach. This is common, though. This is a common technique that I've used with other municipalities, again, trying to develop the most efficient mechanism of financing. It does move away from the state for this year, but again, I believe it's going to be a lower cost of debt and a more efficient financing given the circumstances that we're working with. So I'd be glad to go into more detail, or if anyone has questions, I know this is a little bit different than what you've done in the past. I'd be glad to go into additional detail.
Fred.
One question or one statement I'd like to make that's kind of unique that we briefly talked about is on page that's got the bond issues, that's got the note anticipated note, and it's got the corporate purpose bonds, is the fact that the city is going to use its fund balance to pay in the interest payment. This page here.
I don't think.
Which is a little bit of a different twist. I mean, normally we would have probably
Actually, Fred, you're not using fund balance. There's going to be a premium generated up front from the underwriters, from the purchasers of the bond.
That's for the bond, but on the NAN. That is true statement for the NAN is using the premium, but then, or the bond issue itself, but the NAN, the note anticipated note, it assumes that the NAN is going to be using funds on hand.
That for the 2018 payment only. The 2019 would be wrapped into that long-term financing.
Okay.
Yeah. So and that's about 8,000. I can't read if that's 9,500.
9,500.
Yeah, 9,500. Right.
Now, the only other thing I wanted to mention is tomorrow, or at the Common Council, we're going to approve all the resolutions.
Pardon me?
We are sending to the Common Council all the resolutions.
Yes, all the initial resolutions would go to council.
We'll be going directly to council this coming Tuesday, upcoming Tuesday, which is about 8 of them.
Thank you. Any question? Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
Yep.
You need a motion on that, Fred?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the summary of the 2018 financial plan for the upcoming capital projects.
Second.
Second by Harvey. Further discussion? There being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So ordered. Item 7, review and consideration of a draft of findings regarding the agreed upon procedure report from Hawkins Ash CPAs for the city's portion of the joint municipal court.
I'd like to turn over to Monica Hauser from Hawkins Ash to go through the agreed upon procedure report.
So Fred handed out tonight another a copy of my report. I don't know if you've got a copy earlier. I did very minor.
We just got it.
Stuff.
We just got it. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't want to read it to you, but I understand you haven't had a lot of time to look at it. So I'm just going to kind of talk about the three main steps that we did. So when we do an agreed upon procedures, what we do is we say, we're going to go out and do this, this, and this. We go out and do our procedures, then we come back and we report on this, this, and this, what we did. So that's what we've done here. So number one, what we wanted to do was understand the process for preparing and submission of the monthly municipal court monthly financial report that goes to the state and the information that goes into that report. So we got a good understanding of the process that's happening now. The issue is with the turnover in staff, we had a hard time figuring out how things were done prior to the new staff coming in. So that's one of the comments that I make in there. We know that collections has changed significantly. That's now all being done in the finance office, and it's getting recorded in the Encode software within the finance office instead of being done in the court office or court clerk's office. My next comment there, so I call it the JMC, the Joint Municipal Court Clerk. I believe her title is probably the court supervisor. So new one, Hildy, coming in October of 2017. So now what we noticed is that, and we'll talk about this comment later on, but we're having an issue with following up, making sure the collections were getting done on tickets, citations. And so we're seeing a pretty solid procedure where she's setting reminders within that software and regularly going back and visiting and looking at those cases and making sure that if they're on a payment plan, they're making payments, or if they're not making payments, it's getting turned over to the state. We now know that daily reconciliations are being done in the finance office. Before, I don't believe this was being done, but again, I don't have the paperwork from back then as to how Amber or whoever was preparing that report, how they were actually getting to the numbers. But currently in finance, it's getting done daily to make sure that that report is coming out correctly. It says that it appears that positive changes have been made to the procedures for collections and reporting. Suggests to have written policies as to when open citations are submitted to the SDC, State Debt Collection, TRIP, or et cetera. It would just ensure some consistency in making sure that the staff in the clerk's office, the court office knows when they're supposed to be doing, if they're going to wait, if the judge has to do, review the file first or whatever, they know when that needs to get done. Versus now, I think it's pretty vague and it's just kind of I don't think it's very procedural. It's, well, when I get to it, I'm going to go and do that. So I would just recommend having some good documented procedures there. And then also, obviously, staff turnover is inevitable. We see it in our industry as well. And just having people write down what they're doing, having some documentation, just so that if something happens, if something were to happen to Hildy and she couldn't come into work for a week, can somebody pick up and continue doing what she's doing? So just making sure that that gets documented. So the next thing we went through was determine that if the information that goes into the municipal court monthly financial report can be altered or if it's completely generated from the computer system. And then try to determine the extent of what can be altered coming out of that, the computer system is in code. So I kind of jumped ahead when I started. This is where we had a really hard time figuring out how Amber was generating that report. We have a copy of the report. We can go back and regenerate it and get to the same numbers. I'm assuming she just generates it out of Encode, but we didn't have a trail to be able to figure out, was she going in and modifying anything within certain citations? Or how did she make it work? So I said we were unable to determine the method of generating the report submitted during the time frame tested, which meant those months back. However, it can be regenerated, and we can recreate the original report. There used to be a balancing report done, and then that report was submitted to the state. This process has changed. This is now running through the finance department, and like I said earlier, it's getting reconciled daily, and the finance department is submitting that report. So 2 of the months that I tested, so our agreed upon procedure was to test 3 months, and 2 of those months, we didn't have any issues tying them out. We could tell there was no differences when she went from the reconciliation to the state report. Now in May of 2016, we had some differences. I could not figure out how she's coming up with the numbers. It appears that, and we'll talk about some of the other findings here in just a minute, but there's some adjustments that were being made in certain citations when they were submitted to the SDC. There was an increase in a fine, and then when it was collected, it was decreased. So I believe that some of that was playing into why we had these little differences on this report. Let's see. So I refer to it, the CBD internal and external income on the balancing report, and that was just adding those additional fees. So then the biggest part that we did, number 3, so this is where we went in and we picked out 1 month from each of these years, and we went through all of the citations for that month. So we ran, we got a dump out of the track system. The IT department was able to do that. And then we could look in the Encode system, and we had a paper file for those court cases. So we were trying to match things up and see kind of what discrepancies we found. So you can see under the findings here, I broke them out by month that we tested. So in November of 2015, we tested 151 citations. And our initial sample, the 151, came from the track system. So we had 7 of them that we were missing paperwork on the citation, and 4 of those 7 were not in the ENCODE system. And we don't have a method to determine why that is. Now, some of them, I'll say, if they're juvenile tickets and they serve their community service or whatever the judge had given them as a penalty or whatever, when it got done, it gets wiped out. It's not in the ENCODE system. So potentially some of these could have been juveniles. I didn't have a method to know that. So 5 of them were in tracks, and we had paperwork, but they weren't in the ENCODE system. And the ENCODE system is our internal, how we're keeping track of the collections on the citation. So that was an issue. 19 of them had increases in the fine in ENCODE. Many of these were adding to the SDC fee. Some of them had an increase and then a decrease. 17 of the fines were entered as an increase in ENCODE versus coming in initially from the track system. And I don't know if that was just an issue with when the citation was issued, if it was a wrong amount, or I'm not sure why that would be. 17 tickets were still not marked as paid in ENCODE, and they still might not be paid as of today. So overall collection, just getting things into the SDC system seemed like it was taking a long time. And now I don't know 100% of the legal process as to how long, you know, they have to wait before they submit it to SDC, but it seemed like it was taking longer than I would have expected. So some tickets that came in November of 2015 weren't sent over to the SDC until August of the next year. And then some of them still no payments have been made on that. So that was a little concerning. And then just inconsistency, we noticed inconsistency on sending them to the SDC on a timely basis. So, you know, if we would expect all of the November ones kind of getting sent at a certain time, and they were all over the board. So then for May of 2016, there was a lot more citations. There was 250 citations, and we pulled out, just to disclose, we pulled out all parking citations. We did not look at them. We were looking at other traffic citations. So 250 of them. 13 of them were in the paperwork, in the court date files, but were not in tracks. I'm not sure why that would be. 27 of them, we were missing paperwork, and 17 of those were not in the ENCODE system. And then we had some that were in tracks and had paperwork, but they weren't in the ENCODE system. So again, I just don't know why some of these would not have hit the different tracking systems we have. So 15 of them, the amount in the ENCODE system did not agree to the paperwork or the amount in tracks. Could have been the judge changing, but usually that would have been documented on the paperwork and followed through. 27 of them still not marked as paid in ENCODE, and same comment, they still might not be paid or not collected from the SDC. We just noticed one very small amount, but it was written off. It said for a short payment. It was entered in as an increase in fees, so that just looked a little odd. It was 60 cents. 45 had increases and decreases to the fees in ENCODE. Many of these were adding that SDC fee that we were talking about, and we know that's an incorrect procedure, and that has been changed. And a lot of the ones that they're submitting to SDC right now, they're going back and correcting those if they haven't been submitted, so that they're when they get sent into the state, they're at the right amount. So overall collection, same comment as in November. Seems to be taking a long time. Tickets from May not sent in until January. You know, so is 6, 7, 8 months normal? I guess that's your call. I thought it was a little long. And then inconsistency on when things are getting sent to the SDC. So then for February of 2017, we tested 153 citations. 17 of them were missing paperwork, and 9 of them were not in the in-code system. 6 were in tracks. So I should have mentioned this from the start. Tracks is what comes in when the officer writes the citation. That's tracks. That's where the initial, I guess, process is started. So 6 were in tracks, but were not in the in-code system. 7 did not. The amount in code didn't agree to the paperwork and the amount in tracks. 32 tickets were not marked as paid. A lot of those have been sent to SDC here in December of 2017. There's been a big effort to get in there and clean things up now. 16 of them had increases and decreases in the fees and in code. Again, the same thing. They were in that increase in the SDC fee, which we're cleaning up. And then inconsistencies on when they're getting sent to SDC. Same comment that some tickets had no follow-up for months after no payment. So I just had some general overall comments, my personal opinion, I guess. So one thing I noticed, kind of judge oversight, just physical presence is a concern of mine. I heard some comments. Obviously, I was sitting in there with the staff, just about the judge not being around. They didn't know how he would handle certain things. They were going to ask him, but he hasn't been around to ask, and the court supervisor has been there for a few months, and it still hasn't been taken care of. So I think there's just a lack of them meeting up and oversight, him being there, telling them what they need to be doing. So the process is to leave notes for him, make piles on his desk, so if he comes in before he goes to court, he can look at some things. Lack of organization of papers and files in judge's office. Cases missed entering into in-code. Don't know, was there a reason they were not in the system? And then kind of what are the next steps? So those are my findings. I guess if you have questions, any questions about our procedures, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I have a question.
Wait just a second, Harvey. I wanted to ask one question off the get-go. In your whole study or your audit, did you find any funds, cash, anything missing? I'm going to say that no, with a caveat, because we were looking in the in-code system. Yeah.
And so if something wouldn't have balanced, like on the paperwork to the in-code system, I don't know. I guess, from these findings, you can see that there's increases and decreases in fees. I can't tell from a cash, like I didn't have a cash collection report to be able to go back and verify that because cash was being collected in a different department at that time.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm going to say no. I didn't find anything that alerted me that somebody was stealing money.
Okay. Harvey, go ahead.
Yeah. And this is not a criticism of you, but of the just a general thing. There are a lot of we don't knows and we can't find outs, and that's the nature of the beast I guess we're looking at here. And we knew prior to the work that you did that there are a lot of oversights, inconsistencies, and I hate to be too cynical here, but what do we know now that we didn't before? And are there significant? And second question. Are there significant actions we should take now, given the work you did?
It's a loaded question.
No,
it's an answer. So your first part, what do you know now that you didn't know then? I guess I'm not sure. I wasn't involved in the early on stages. I saw the reports from Sean. I guess I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, okay, let me ask you a different way. Again, we knew, or have known since, I guess, Eric brought the issue up, I don't know, months ago, that there were, again, a lot of mishandling of paper and oversights and so forth. We knew that. Mm-hmm. But given the work that you've done here, I was thinking that perhaps you'd say, my goodness, we need to do this. based on what we found here, we must do so-and-so. It's obvious that we need, but I don't see that here. That we need to go out and do this, this, and this that we're not doing.
The problem is that so much has changed from, you know, one of these months that we looked at was November of 2015. From November of 2015 to December of 2017, cash collections are different. The staff is all different. The way that we're preparing the reports are all different. So it's hard to go back and say, you need to do this, this, and this. I believe that the procedures now, we've corrected a lot of the issues. Not having, you know, some of that paperwork, we can't tell why things weren't entered. Some of the paperwork, we have no idea. They have no idea where it's at. So I don't know what we do from here. I guess.
Eric.
Thank you. We had an opportunity to speak over the phone initially as to some of the findings before the report is generated. So for me, it's not a bit of surprise, but if I may be able to answer, Harvey, some of the questions as you pose. As discussed with Monica as we're doing this procedure, I expressed the concern that actions taken, perhaps overreaching on my behalf into the court, were appropriate because of what I had identified and what I had seen. And I think we've seen that disorganization, lack of record keeping, lack of process and procedures being followed on a consistent basis. So that any questions that could come up, I didn't feel confident that we could answer. That they were done appropriately, or the question asked here, was there any opportunity for theft or money being missing? I don't think we had any way of answering that question. And quite frankly, the results that I see here speak to what I feared was existing. Not my worst case scenario, which is the good news, but what I had feared is that indeed that there was disorganization and there was a lack of supervision and a lack of process being followed. What I'm also pleased to hear is that some of the reasons we can't track everything is because we have made the appropriate changes, moving things to finance, going to a regular balancing outside of that department, having more eyes on that site, and getting personnel changes that have that background in following the process. I guess to answer the last question there, where do we go from here? What I identified here is a couple things. Standard operating procedures. We still need to not just identify them and follow them, but we need to write them down. We need to document them, and as Monica said, Mary, you have written down here too. What I was talking about, the proverbial bus that drives by and unfortunately runs over one of the employees, we have something in place that someone can follow up and back up. And it's not just in the case of an employee, but it's identifiable. If a concern comes up again, we can go back and say, well, here's the process that needs to be followed. Where is the problem? Has it occurred? And we can go identify that. And the second thing that I think it does identify here in the report that I don't think I have an answer to is the lack of supervision, management supervision within that department, following direction. I think some of that may be the nature of municipal court, having an extremely part-time, paid, compensated judge for how much hours we expect them to be in there and what kind of experience we expect for an elected office. I think there may be some broader solutions to that problem, but I think that's the other issue there. It's a small department that does require, a direct supervision, one that I'm technically not to provide. So those two things I think identified that, I've seen that there was a problem. I think we identified that it isn't criminal. I think it's disorganization, but we've had some very important solutions identified to us that we need to follow, and that is the policies and procedures, following standard policy procedure, having a manual written down, and then how do we deal with the lack of direct oversight and supervision within the department.
So the difference between the report that our city attorney gave us matches the audit. So we paid $8,000 to get the same information we already got from the city attorney.
Monica has a loaded question.
$8,000 of taxpayers' money to get the same results that we already had before we did this audit. Is that correct?
It confirms what I felt, and it confirms what Sean reported.
Can I ask you a question? When we commissioned you to do this, again, I'm not criticizing you because you went through all this. What I thought might come back was, let's say, under your comments, they wouldn't be general, they'd be specifics. And it would be, oh my goshes, we've got to do so-and-so. I can't believe that this is happening. We've got to go back and do this, this, and this, because this is what this has found. But I don't see that. I don't see anything that would give me or any of us urgency to go out and change this or that. Yes, Mayor.
Mayor.
Well, I think that is what Monica is saying. I think what she's saying is we need a process and a procedures manual of some kind so that everybody knows, you know, like Eric said before, that proverbial getting hit by a bus, that somebody that comes after can pick up the pieces and just hit the ground running. So I think that's what she's telling us, unless I'm putting words in your mouth.
No, that's correct.
And I think that process is gone. The way it's processed through the finance, the monies, all the changes that have been implicated already or started or done that you've looked at since then, since all the changes in staff and all that stuff, has been done. So I'm looking at $8,000 for this. This is no criticizing you at all. You did your job. You came up with the same results that the city attorney had already advised us. I disagreed with the spending of $8,000 in taxpayers' money, but it was insisted. So I was looking for some other results other than what the city attorney already gave us, but I don't see any. Jim.
Thanks, Bob. I'm just sitting back here listening to all of this information, and from where I come from and the situations that I have had the opportunity to view in my lifetime, I find it incredible that we're sitting here and there's no one to blame, that this just happened, you know, and nothing happens. I mean, somebody here is not facing responsibility of operating this system the way it was designed to work. And you can surmise anything you want, but this didn't happen in a bubble. There's some awfully sloppy work going on here. I'm not asking for anybody to agree. Not to acknowledge that would be absolutely ridiculous. So there are reasons this happened, and it's not just bad paperwork. You alluded to a little bit of that too, but it's mismanagement at its highest level. It's just pathetic. So I can tell you in the private sector, if this happened, that someone would be gone just like that. So
Harvey?
Yeah. I think you asked it right from the get-go here. So far as we know, there's no fraudulent activity. Is that correct?
I did not find anything that led me to that.
That to me says a lot in terms of what we should and shouldn't do here. It seems that we should not just go out and chase, you know, to find speeders or people out on the street who did this, that, or the other, or find something we should do internally to solve a fraudulent activity. That to me is a case closed.
Fred, will this report be forwarded to the Joint Municipal Court Committee or that group of people so they can see what the findings are?
No, keep in mind this audit was the city's portion of the
Okay.
It's not the Joint Municipal Court, town, cities, and villages cases.
Is there a way for us to
Well, they will see.
allow us to give them a copy of our findings since it pertains to the Joint Municipal Court? I think especially the final page 3, all municipalities should be aware of these observations and the things that have been accumulated or observed through this audit. Eric?
As I think Fred was alluding to, but something to be aware of, the last sentence of the report on page 3. Keep in mind that as owner of it, the city is paying for it out of general funds instead of having originally intent was to have the court pay for its own audit. So keep in mind that it is solely your property and is only to be used for the city's information. However, the city's, it's a public record, sends it to municipal court for their review. I don't think there's any issue with that. Correct.
So the $8,000 were on Alaska taxpayers' money?
Yep, and it was.
All right.
Yep, on Alaska taxpayers' money, and keep in mind it was only on Alaska cases reviewed. We did not do the other towns and villages since the full court did not pay for the full court's procedures. This is taxpayer money only, local taxpayer money only.
Thank you.
Can I make one more comment?
Please.
So,
Yes.
one thing that I would look at, and it'd be asking some of these questions, how can this happen? How can we have this much, like, you know, the paperwork missing? Okay, we probably know. It's, you know, hopefully we have a better system now. But sit down with the staff or somebody to figure out, how do these things happen? How can we have a ticket that comes through tracks but doesn't get into Encode? And, you know, when we're going through the standard operating procedures, documenting stuff, you know, these are the things that we need to answer to hopefully identify then, you know, and then there has to be a determination. Do we start going back and reviewing stuff? You know, does the court supervisor go back and make sure that we've paid, that things have gotten paid or sent to SDC, or, you know, does the city have some money to be recouped there?
Okay.
So.
And I think that's part of the process that's going on right now. And the new person that we hired in there has made some recommendations, and I think she's doing everything she can to get us so we comply with everything. So this will eliminate all this stuff. So we just got to give her the time to and the tools to do what she wants to do, which I think will do it. Fred?
Just a couple points I wanted to add is the dollars that the city did spend to have an individual that had 17 plus years of experience from Tyler was indeed helpful, not once but twice. There were portions of the module that my staff uses, as well as the Joint Municipal Court, that has been in the module for quite some time but not used. For example, scheduling, some of the stuff, some of the reports, when things need to be printed, some of the items for tracking were there but just weren't utilized. And I can tell you that from the time from the finance department as well as the change in that staff, and with the training we have, that software is being used. I can also say that in the past 4 months, I have not, over the years of being with the city, have my report on my desk to file with the state within 2 days after the month is over. And that has happened because we are daily balancing and reconciling with what comes in through funds with the software. And like I say, the procedure, I totally agree that there are things that do hit tracks that won't be recognized. For example, I think, Bob, you would attest to it, is when a police officer may collect a citation that's not even the city's, it may be the state or the county. Those are not going to be in tracks. And so, but I agree with you that what needs to be done in the procedures manual is to indicate those that were not in tracks, so they're all accounted for, so that if you have X amount of track cases, X amount in Encode, these are the ones that were discarded, they have to balance out.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion. I'll take a motion to accept the audit supplied by Hawkins and Ash CPA as outlined.
Second?
Second by Harvey. Further discussion? There being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So ordered. Thank you. Item 8, personnel. Review and consideration of a new policy, 4.13, unmanned aerial device policy.
This policy is coming to Finance and Personnel. It has been reviewed and drafted by our attorneys. There were a couple minor changes made in it because everything was specifically outlining the police department. We added the fire department information in there as well, seeing so both police and fire are likely to be the major departments utilizing an unmanned aerial device. But we felt it was important. There was money donated that the mayor talked about a couple months ago for the city to purchase some sort of drone and to have a policy in place before we made any sort of purchase so that our citizens could be comfortable with what we were utilizing that drone for. And I think the policy very clearly outlines the appropriate uses and how it has to be used, and then who's coordinating the program, as well as who's authorized to use it and what types of things do they have to have in order to be able to utilize those devices. So again, like I said, this was drafted and reviewed by the city attorney. We're looking to get something approved. So I didn't know if you had any questions. I know the police chief is here as well to answer any questions. And I know Sean will be available at the council meeting should you have questions on it as well.
Thanks, Hope. Do you want a motion to approve this onto the council?
It's at your wish, so you can either discuss it now or move it forward without a recommendation to council and then discuss it at council.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we move this on to the full council so the entire council can have their input on this policy before we...
Second that.
Second by Harvey. Discussion. There being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So ordered. Thanks, Hope. Review and consideration of giving direction to the police chief to provide a staffing plan, reorganization plan for the police department's administrative staff and administrative duties. We have Eric. If we want, we can move on to 10, and we'll move on to item 10. Review and consideration of renewal of the Gunderson Health System Lutheran Hospital Agreement for 2018. Hope.
Alrighty, so the Lutheran Hospital Agreement is the agreement that we have in place with Gunderson should we decide we wanted to do pre-work screens before somebody is hired to determine whether or not they're physically capable of doing the job. We do a medical screen, which is kind of like the drug screen, and checking to make sure they have all the proper immunizations in place, particularly for police and fire. But the fire department does their own in-house, which Gunderson has already approved. So this was put into place just in case we wanted to do additional departments. It's minor changes to the rates, but otherwise the contract language is the same. The rates slightly increase, but that's to be expected. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't approve it.
Thank you.
Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Jim, second by Harvey. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so ordered. We'll go back to item 9, review and consideration of giving direction to the police chief to provide a staffing plan, reorganization plan for the police department's administrative staff and administrative duties. Eric, am I throwing this at you? Can I?
I guess I can give a background. I call Chief up because we've had some conversation regarding this as well.
Good evening, Chief.
It's come from conversations regarding particularly the administrative side of the police department. Expressed to me some concerns as to staffing in there. So already back in November, we had some conversations regarding that with the chief as to the personnel we have and the tasks and duties. And the concern expressed in November was the type of tasks being assigned to employees of a salary rank, or do we have the right people doing the right tasks, if you will. that aspect there. That led to the conversation with the chief, and then carry a little bit from internal. You had conversations then in November.
So we're just going to start about what we've been doing internally?
Internally in November, I think it's appropriate.
Well, one of the things that we do within the police department is try to continually evaluate what we're doing. One of the things that I have as a goal of myself is not to remain static in the approach that I take to managing a police department. We have a vision team in place that assists with that to give guidance and direction. So we're constantly reviewing what we're doing. I believe, and I can be corrected on this, but I believe this specifically relates to the professional standards sergeant, which we had the job description approved by the council in April of 2016. That was put together for a very specific reason, and I can go into that if anybody cares to hear. But fast forwarding to November 2017, one of the things that me and my Assistant Chief Troy Miller do on an annual basis is we review the budget at the 10-month mark to make sure that we're on track to where we need to be with our budgeting. And then we also start talking about plans for the next year on how we deal with some of our staffing issues. One of the things that we specifically talked about was the professional standards sergeant's position. We talked internally if we were getting everything that we could out of that position. We have a job description in place. We sent out an email, which I have copies of back in March of 2017, that basically outlined the primary functions and the non-primary functions of the professional standards sergeant. That position stays very busy doing some of the tasks that we ask it to do. We decided going into 2018 that we're going to have an exercise early in 2018, and we're getting it scheduled for within the next 2 weeks because we were waiting for another key to see if it was going to happen or not, and basically outlining all of our duties that we do within the police department that fall kind of on the administrative level. Then what we're going to do is try to figure out how to rearrange what people do to try to specifically be more efficient in the way that we're doing things. One of the examples that we looked at are open records requests. Our agency did in excess of 600 open records requests in 2017, which is overwhelming to our department. I have an assistant chief being paid at the salary of an assistant chief to do a big portion of those open records. And one of the things that we want to do, since there was probably no relief for us as far as hiring additional personnel with that, was to try to shift some duties around to get that off of the assistant chief's plate onto a plate that we felt like it belonged. So in the process, also looking at the professional standards sergeant's position. We want to realign the duties for this position. We want to try to figure out, going through 2018, is it what is best for the agency as a whole. We talked back in November, we want to assess it in June of 2018 to see if this is the route that we want to continue with this position. If it's not a route that we want to continue with the position, we have to figure out at that point what we want to do with it going forward. The reason why we're picking June of 2018 is because we feel like with the way that we do our scheduling for the previous or for the next year is we give our sergeants and our officers ample notice on what their duties are going to be for the next year so they can make plans for family and everything else. In November 2017, we didn't feel like we had enough notice for that, even if we wanted to make changes. However, I don't think at that point it was necessary to make the changes to begin with. I still firmly believe, based on what we asked that person to do, it's the best thing for my department to do still at this point. We can go over some of the duties that they do. One of the goals that we were looking at doing, and cut me short if I'm going further than what you want, but there was a point in 2016, I believe, where we went from 4 shifts to 3 shifts. We had a days, evenings, mids, and we had a swing shift. What we decided to do at that point, we felt like it was more efficient for the police department to take the swing shift officers and put them out onto the regular team. So we basically had just 3 teams, first shift, second shift, or day shift, evenings and mids. At that point, we had 4 sergeants for 3 teams. what we want to do is we want to take some of the duties that a patrol sergeant was doing, that was taken away from the patrol function that we want them to be doing, and seeing if we could shift it to the fourth sergeant that was in play. At the same time, it also gave us the luxury to look at some of the things that that person could be doing, such as training, such as internal affairs, such as recruiting, such as the FTO programs. There's a whole litany of things that we ask that person to do. Can we put it under one hat that helps us in multiple areas of the department? I feel like I personally made the right call in that, and I stand by that. I think there's others that feel different about that. But that's kind of where we're at with this. We're constantly reevaluating. The agenda talks about providing a staffing plan, reorganizational plan for the police department. It's already being done anyway. Whether the outcome is going to appease everybody, that's not for me to say. But again, we're in the process of doing this as we speak. And I would guess that would be done by the end of the first quarter of 2018.
Yes, if I would interrupt before you got ahead of me. You got way ahead of me, but you were on a roll, so I figured I'd let you go talking about that. Again, internally, my understanding in the conversations is back in November, began to do the review, looking at your testing going forward. I think as an internal situation, perhaps we just were not aware of that. So in communication with other people, I couldn't necessarily lead that conversation on your behalf that way. But I'm glad to hear that there was and continues and will always continue to be, sounds like, review of being the most efficient with your staff, correct?
Under my administration style, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I worked under 5 chiefs in 20 years at Joplin. I saw a lot of them come in that were static in their thought process, and they work inside a little box, and they let the outside world not influence their decision making. That's not me. We continually evaluate what we do. I continually try to develop staffing that is what I feel like is best for the 18,000 people that we serve, 18,000 people and the ones that come into our city. I think the police department does an effective job at what we do based off of what we ask them to do with our staffing levels.
So if there is a plan in play, I guess, lack of a better word, a plan, a potential new org charts or position descriptions that you'd be looking at, regardless of action taken today, you'd be willing to present it?
Oh, absolutely, because what we're going to be doing based off of a retirement that was announced today as far as one of our civilian staff, we're going to be redoing job descriptions. We're going to be reviewing them. I talked to Hope today to ask for that job description with the assistance of trying to see if, because that's a civilian position, it makes much more sense to me to be paying the level of rate of pay to do open records at that level. So what we're going to be looking at doing is kind of shifting those duties, but that person has a whole litany of other duties that have to be relieved and shifted around as well. So part of that is going to be reviewing the job duties of the professional standards sergeant. Like I said, this is a position that maybe it'll be here in 2019, maybe it won't be here in 2019. Maybe it's something that gets addressed at that point. But there's going to be changes recommended as a whole, and it's not going to probably only, I don't know if it'll impact the organizational chart, but it's going to impact the job descriptions that impact the organizational chart. When you look at an administrative plan, I look at the organizational chart that defines what our administration plan is, because it tells you basically where all of our positions lay out, and then each one of those positions has a job description which outlines what their responsibilities are for. And again, not only we're not the only ones that look at job descriptions and make sure that our people are doing what they need to be doing. I know that Hope sends out job descriptions for review. I don't know if it's an annual basis or how often we do it, but I know the city as a whole is constantly looking at this as well. So we're not the only ones that do it. But I think the one thing that I would assure the committee here is we look at it on a continual basis.
I guess the last thing as a review, not speaking as a law enforcement professional since I am not one, but I think we made it clear sort of the concerns as been expressed to me regarding, we already talked about tasks aligned with salary rates, as well as then the use of sworn officers to do more law enforcement and less administrative type tasks. Those are the things that have been expressed to me, and if I got that incorrect, please interrupt. That's my understanding from what I'm gathering.
From me?
No, from what's jump-started our conversation both November and then this past week as well.
Yeah, and there's areas of the department that concern me on things that I think aren't aligning with what we should be doing. Again, it causes frustrations across the board when we are overtasked with some of the duties that we're doing, and we're trying to manage the best that we can with the personnel that we have and making the decisions that we have to make to run the department as effectively as we can. And to be quite honest with you, in 2008, I was hired to do that. And I have to live with the outcome of the decisions that I make. If the police department has issues, they're going to fall on my shoulders. I need to have the ability to make plans that I see are a best fit for me that have the most positive impact on the citizens that we serve. And that's what I strive for every day. It really is. Whether that aligns with everybody's viewpoints, I'm sure it doesn't. It's police departments can be very contentious in nature anyway. But I truly do the best job that we can. I don't do it by myself. Assistant Chief Miller is a big part of that process as well, because one thing that I don't want to do is be somebody that dictates how this department is running through my eyes only. Again, going back to some of the processes that we put in place, like with the vision team and all that, to really be open-minded in our approach to how we police. And I think it's very effective, in my opinion.
I guess some of my concerns are this. We've got 3 brand new officers. We've got a couple other officers that have been here less than 2 years. We have 3 sergeants that are on patrol. We have 1 sergeant that's not. And it doesn't take a sworn officer to get records requests, does it?
It does not. That's what I just talked about.
No. Yeah, and you said that. So that's going to be adjusted. So what I'm looking at is the supervision of brand new officers on the street to be able to go to a supervisor for questions, procedures, and so on. Secondly, to have a supervisor on duty that can cover the city liability-wise to make sure we don't get sued by an officer who hasn't had the experience to know what they're doing. I want the young officers to be able to go to a supervisor. So if we have 3 sergeants, we have 3 shifts. Those sergeants have to have vacations and days off and so on. So there are a number of days that we don't have a supervisor on duty. Is that correct?
This department, as far as I know, has never been 24/7 supervised. It wasn't 24/7 supervised when I got here, and it's still not 24/7 supervised.
Well, I remember it used to be, we had a rotating sergeant, and we had 3 sergeants. So
we still have
pretty much they covered
and we
just
have
about
the
just
on-call,
everything. But right now, what I'm concerned about, as a council member, I'm concerned about the liability for the citizens of Onalaska. And I want to make sure our young officers have supervision out there, somebody to go to should they have questions, or have a supervisor present to watch what's going on to make sure that they are following procedures, they are doing it the right way. And I want them to have a resource to go to. I just, personally, I do not understand having a sworn officer that's in the office Monday through Friday, and we're lacking supervision out on the street. I just don't agree with it.
I'm going to answer that real quick, because as chief of police and what I view as a highly litigious occupation, I'm with you. I don't come to work every day with my head buried, not worrying about liability. I don't. I mean, I don't know if you think I do, but
no,
I understand that it's a highly litigious occupation. Again, we've never had 24/7 supervision. Each of the officers that you're talking about fall underneath of a sergeant that they report to. The way we lined up the professional standards position is we intentionally put it on a 10 to 6 position, a 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., so they are there for half of the day shift and half of the evening shift. So if there's not a day shift sergeant that's available, we have a sergeant there at least half of that shift, and vice versa. If there's not an evening shift sergeant available, that sergeant's available to cover for that shift too, because what you're really talking about here is having a sergeant then help cover the gap. And there's been plenty of times that sergeant has covered the gaps that Bob is talking about. And this position is not only a position where they sit at a desk. I got CAD calls here from 2016 and 2017 where that sergeant has spent time on the roads, going out on calls of service, being there for their officers, making sure they're being there, being supervised. He's not sitting just at a desk doing a job of an administrator. The job descriptions that have been assigned to him from the primary functions and the non-primary functions are not things that we just created just because we have a professional standards sergeant. They're things that have to be done. So even if I don't have a professional standards sergeant, the majority of these things on here fall underneath a sworn officer. So somebody's going to be doing them anyway, regardless of what I call a sergeant. They just are. Somebody has to do this stuff. Sorry, Harvey.
Go ahead, Art.
I'm sorry, I don't know where this discussion's going, frankly. And what conclusion we're trying to come to. Maybe the conclusion will be to ask the chief to put together a study of what, how he should reorganize or whatever, which apparently you're doing. I mean, you're on an ongoing basis. Apparently, you're trying to determine how best to run your department and how to move people around and so forth. I mean, are we trying to reinforce the idea that he should do this, or are we going to be voting on something to do or not to do, Bob? I'm not. Where are we going with this?
No, I think it's just a review and consideration of giving direction to the chief. He's got a retirement today. I'm assuming that's Pam. So I think the duties within the police department, the administrative department, can be evaluated on who does what. Talking to Troy in the past, I know he is overwhelmed with all the stuff that he's doing. And I'm trying to get it in mind why this position is what it is, when it, in many aspects, it doesn't have to be a sworn position. It can be, I don't want to be paying somebody $100,000 a year that's looking up public records. I think we can adjust staff. I mean, you're the salary and benefits together.
Totally agree. I've said that.
I'm looking for some idea of the duties that are non-sworn, that can be done and handled by administrative staff that are non-sworn. I'm also looking for supervision of our young officers and covering liability for the city. Those are my concerns. Now, if there's an increase that we need to have another sergeant, maybe that's something you can recommend or we can look at. But I'm sorry, that position, I just do not agree with.
When you look at the position of a non-boots on the ground patrol sergeant, this is no different than what an investigative sergeant would be. I believe that we had investigative sergeants before I got here. That would be a position that has been created from a sergeant, yanked from the patrol, and put over into the investigation side that's doing administrative stuff on the investigative side, where they're investigating cases, but they're not doing patrol functions. So this is not a position that is just a wild thought. I mean, departments use these type of positions to try to handle some of these duties. I totally understand and have the same concerns that you do. I wish this department was a 24/7 supervised department. I've never worked for a department. That's not, other than the little community that I did as a favor to them. I've always been privileged to not have to worry about that. Do I like the fact that I have young officers out there that are not supervised? No, but they can pick up the phone. We always have somebody on call that can pick up a phone and make a phone call. Is it the best? No, but if you really want to help me, and you've already mentioned it, the only way we can get to 24/7 supervision, even with the 4 sergeants I have, is for additional staff.
Well, that's what I'm looking at. If we can take this position and the duties that are outlined, and I've read what the duties are for this position, many of which can be handled by non-sworn position.
I don't know if I want internal affairs to be handled by non-sworn. I don't know if I want training of police officers to be handled by non-sworn. The open records stuff definitely can be handled by non-sworn. I know we're not in here to probably break this down, but I'm just saying I disagree just a little bit with that.
Harvey?
I strongly believe that this body here should not be in the position in this meeting of determining the rightness and wrongness of one position. It seems to me that it seems to me that question should be handled with the staff. If it'd be Eric, Hope, you, others within your department, and maybe with some direct input by the council. But if there's a change that should be taking place, that decision should be made by you people and brought to us. We should not be debating this tonight, I do not believe.
And that step that you're talking about was already occurring before this meeting. I've had conversations with the mayor, I've had conversations with the city administrator, and prior to me even having conversations with those two, I've had conversations with my own staff.
Another comment, Bob, please. It seems to me as though we could easily bring Dan up here. We could get Dan up and say, Dan, I want you to go through every staff member you've got. And by the way, there's one particular one I want you to address. We could ask, Jared's still here, we asked Jared to come up and I can go through, trade-offs between so-and-so. It's kind of like get an operational review, every other month. I'm puzzled as to what we're doing here.
What I will assure the committee is we do an annual review of everything that we do. It's many times we're doing it multiple times throughout the year.
Yeah, I agree.
Jim?
I agree.
With what? I'm sorry.
With your position, Chief explained what his intentions are. I think he has a right in his position to make that choice about how he wants to police. I think if we want to have some comments based on some other issues, I think that's perfectly okay. But I think the final decision should be his.
And I agree. He answers to the mayor by statute, but this council answers to the finances and salaries and benefits and all that stuff. So I want to make sure that the citizens getting their protection for what they're paying for. That's my concern. And that's we handle the budget. We handle the purse strings. That is our business. So that is part of our job.
And not to interject, but we're on the same page there, Bob.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Hope?
And I'd just like to say, particularly with the resignation, this gives us a better opportunity to review several different jobs in that area. And as we review them, we will bring them back to Finance and Personnel. So I'm assuming this will not need to be on the council agenda.
Okay, thanks, Hope. Thank you. Item 11.
Sure. Thank you.
Review and consideration of renewal of Gunderson Health System Occupational Health Service Agreement for 2018. Hope.
All right, so this is the agreement that we have in place to do pre-employment physicals and our random drug tests, or if we had reasonable suspicion drug tests, things like that. And essentially, the contract language itself hasn't changed, but obviously the rate schedule does change periodically. I reviewed this as well. There's some minor changes. TB tests are going up. A few of the other ones are increasing slightly. So I don't see anything that warrants any concern. They're just kind of the standard increases. Typically, if I have a concern, I contact Gunderson and find out why there's such a large increase, which I've done in the past, but I'm not seeing that this time.
Thank you.
So a motion is required here?
Yes.
To make a motion to renew the Gunderson Health System Occupational Health Service Agreement according to HOPE's procedures or decisions.
Second.
Motion by Harvey, second by Jim to approve. Any further discussion? There being none, all signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Jim, second by Harvey. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We'll conclude it.
Thank you.
We already covered that.
You missed the